He said it like he owned the whole block. "This car doesn't belong here, neither do you." And his palm tapped my hood like it was a stool at his favorite bar, like I was supposed to sit down and say thank you, sir, for the privilege of existing. And I remember thinking how bright the sky was over Brookstone Ridge, how the lawns were too green to be real, how my old dark green Jaguar purred like something alive, the same engine I rebuilt bolt by stubborn bolt on weekends, and how the golden retriever down the street suddenly got quiet, like even dogs know when the air turns, you know what I mean? Because one minute you're just grabbing the package on your porch in a black silk dress, and the next you're a problem someone is excited to solve. Yeah, that happened. And I smiled, not because I felt safe or small, but because a smile is a fuse you can choose to light. Slow. Officer Wade. Kincaid did his slow circle with the mirrored sunglasses, stomach first, jaw second, and fingers tracing my paint like a man searching for a reason to get paid, ma'am. "Is this your vehicle?" he said, voice soft in that fake friendly way that always comes right before a shove. "It is, officer," I said, breathing through the flowers in my arm, like they could filter the stink of old coffee on his breath. "Is there a problem?" And he pointed at the curb, grinning at his own cleverness, 13 inches from the edge. "Violation. Big one in this neighborhood," he said, like the tape measure lived in his mouth, and I saw it plain as day. This wasn't about inches. This was about borders. He thought he drew with his badge, and he leaned on my hood like a bartender and said, "A ticket's already written. But maybe it doesn't have to be. Maybe headaches disappear with community contributions. 200 cash, no receipt." And he didn't blink, waiting for me to blink. Instead, I didn't. I said, "I'm not paying you a bribe. You can write the ticket, or you can move along," and the blink came. Not the eyelids, the kind behind the eyes when a switch flips and a man who's done this 100 times meets someone who didn't bring the script. "You think you're clever," he said, stepping too close, plastic radio mic cracking like dry skin. "You think a fancy car and a little dress make you above the rules. Let me tell you who's in charge on this street, and I said it the way you say. A fact you've already measured 3 times. I know exactly who's in charge, and it isn't a thief with a badge." The word thief landed first. His jaw locked. His hand dropped not to the ticket book, to the holster, and the sound of the safety clicking off. Cut the afternoon in half, low ready muzzle to asphalt. The kind of angle that says, "I'm not pointing at you, I'm just pointing near you. So if you breathe wrong, the story writes itself. Hands behind your back. Now," he said. And my body did the math, it always does. 3 steps and a wrist lock and a heel. And that gun slides under a Prius. But the street had eyes, a neighbor watering roses and pretending to love her sprinklers. A guy with a pressure washer staring hard at one speck of driveway like it held the secrets of the universe. The story was already written for them, and I was the villain. No matter how many polite vowels I used. Long game, I told myself, long game. My name is Talia Monroe, and I raised my hands. The cuffs bit a notch tighter than the handbook says, because that's how men like Wade prove you're not in control. "Good girl," he breathed. And that was the brick I set on the anger in my chest. Not to smother it, just to hold it down while I built the case that would make it useful. He shoved me into the back of the cruiser without guarding my head. I ducked anyway, and we rolled past my porch where the welcome mat still had a corner flipped from the delivery guy, past the convenience store with the broken lens on the corner, past a traffic cam on Maple that nobody budgeted to fix. And he gave the speech small men give when they think silence is agreement. You people think you can come in and you know the rest. And I listened to what mattered, the route, the pausing hand over the radio, the way he checked mirrors. When there was nothing to check, the station looked like a DMV that forgot what daylight was. Beige on beige, fluorescent hum, disinfectant laid over old coffee and older cigarettes. Sergeant Boston Hale behind the desk, thick fingers, thicker mustache, wedding ring that said he liked the weight of things. "What do we have, Wade?" he asked without looking up. "Attitude, plus resisting, plus assault." "If she breathes wrong," Wade said, and Hale smiled. Without teeth, pushed the ink pad like he was sliding me a drink. The camera in the corner had a little red light that didn't glow and that told me more than the posters about community. They did the little cuts, the slow pat down that lingers at your hips, the smirk at the word consultant when I said my job, the laugh men do in garages when they think the door is shut. I asked for a phone call and Hale said, "You'll get what you get when you get it." And they walked me past fading paint to a cell that smelled like bleach and old fear. The door clanged. The lock clicked. I sat with my back straight and my breathing slow, and I did the only thing that helps in places like that. I wrote the scene in my head. Names times tells weak seams. I counted footsteps until the pattern changed. Somewhere past midnight, a younger officer came down the hall like he was in a hurry to look casual. "Name tag," said Jay. He touched the bars like he was checking them, and without looking at me said, "They're writing the report. Now it won't match what happened. It never does." And his keys jingled a cover tune for the whisper, "Sally Port." Payphone far right corner blind spot moving a drunk in 20, maybe 2 minutes, and a folded napkin map slid under the door. Then he was gone, shoulders squared like he hadn't just put his badge on a different side of the line. I waited for the drunk to arrive, waited for the shouting and the heavy boots. Then I worked. They'd taken my shoes, but not the small habit sewn into the hem of my dress. A tension bar, thin as a bobby pin. 2 minutes cuffs, side open. Lock gave up like a cheap lie. The Sally Port blew cold air that smelled like exhaust and lost time. The payphone looked like a museum piece, but the line still had a heartbeat. I slid into the blind corner and dialed from muscle memory. "Authenticate," the machine said. "Sentinel," I answered. "Talia Monroe. Code Crimson." 6 Delta and a human voice with no edges said, "We have you status. Hostile domestic entity law enforcement nexus location. Brookstone Municipal Systemic Network. Suspected. Do you require immediate extraction?" "Negative," I said. "Extraction cauterizes, it doesn't cure. I'm initiating redline echo. Pause the kind where people in rooms without windows start moving faster. Authorized control, online requirements. Full eyes and ears on the building. Audio, video, thermal. Financial and comms workups on Sergeant Boston Hale, Officer Wade Kincaid. Any frequent contacts. And I need a clean phone, a pendant recorder, and marked cash for a field transaction. Dead drop 2 blocks east in the municipal garden under the 4th bench. 20 minutes confirmed immediate plan. Put my cuffs back on and looked like I learned my lesson. And I hung up, threaded back through the corridor, clicked myself in, closed my eyes and let the brick sit heavy. Morning is cruel in holding cells. It paints a square of light on the floor like a joke about hope. Wade came whistling baton, pinging the bars. "Sleep well?" he asked, and I made my shoulders round and my voice small. "Please, I'm new here." I panicked. "Is there any way this can go away?" And he did that fake math where he strokes his chin and narrates his mercy. 200 became 500, became 2,500 cash. No wire, no friends. We walked to an ATM. "You keep your voice sweet and your hands where I can see them." And I nodded. Like fear was the only thing keeping my head up, the dead drop had delivered. The pendant looked like a silver coin on a chain warm against my collarbone, listening to everything. The clean phone looked like any other phone. The number I called looked like my bank. The woman's tone could have calmed a rattlesnake. "Funds available. ATM withdrawal authorized." Wade drove an unmarked sedan like he'd just invented discretion, to a strip mall with a dead laundromat and a buzzing nail salon sign parked in the far corner where he thought the world didn't look. "Here's how this works," he said. "1 cuff off. You walk to that machine, you bring back my money." "No tricks, Crystal," I said, voice trembling just enough to feel real. And I walked slow to the ATM, slid the card numbers in. Machine word bills came crisp, marked in ways a jury will always love. I turned and saw it in his eyes. The hunger, the relief, the story he'd tell about being a forgiving man. "Count it out," he said. And I did. 1 stack, 2 stack. "All there, good girl," he said, stuffing it in his pocket and beginning the sentence about reports that sometimes get lost when good people make mistakes. He didn't reach the period. 3 black vans carved the parking lot into a box from both ends, and the alley doors opened. Agents moved like water poured into a mold that fit the ground. FBI hands in the air, on your knees. Wade froze, face doing that fish thing, eyes bouncing from guns to me like the world had gone sideways. "Officer Wade Kincaid," I said so. The modified ATM mic caught it clean. "You are under arrest for extortion, conspiracy, and deprivation of rights under color of law." He said. I set him up and I looked at him like a man tripping over a sign that says, "Watch your step. You set yourself up when you asked for cash in a parking lot." I said, "Yeah." That landed while he rode away red-faced and suddenly small. The second team went through the station like a weather front that had been promised for years. Not loud, just certain lockers opened, hard drives bagged Boston. Hale still had a donut in his hand when the cuffs clicked. That's how hard he believed mornings never change. Officer Jamie Tran stood near the records room and raised his hand 1 inch toward a shelf with a binder labeled something boring inside. A ledger with dates and amounts and initials that lined up with phone logs and body cam gaps like teeth in a zipper. By noon, the local news vans had learned to park like a parade. The Chiron didn't tread lightly. FBI raids, Brookstone precinct in corruption probe, the ATM clip ran on loop, counted out. It's all there, and the mayor practiced the few bad apples phrase while agents rolled boxes behind him. The district attorney who liked golf and long lunches stared at his shoes when someone asked why a dozen complaints died in the same drawer that night at the community center on Cedar. The quiet finally cracked a shop owner I'd seen sweeping his steps, said he'd been paying for peace since 2021. A grandmother said her grandson spent a weekend in a holding cell because a taillight died and a narrative replaced him. People said not all cops, but these cops, this place, this pattern. And the room nodded the way a body breathes after holding air too long. I stood in the back with my hands in my pockets. Pendant now, just jewelry, and Chief Ethan Cole slid in beside me, suit, wrinkled eyes red at the edges. The man took this job 6 months ago to clean a house that didn't want a broom anywhere near it. You did this, he said softly, and I shook my head. We did this, and they did this. I pointed my chin at the room at a kid barely 20 saying he learned to drive with his hands at 10 and 2 because his life taught him other rules. First trials don't look like TV, they look like paperwork. But the paperwork sang marked bills that danced the same number line audio from a pendant that didn't stutter a ledger, that told stories for anyone willing to read. The defense tried the usual doors, entrapment, character, momentary lapse, but none of those doors opened because the handle was just truth, and a camera that didn't care who watched. The jury came back faster than anyone expected. The sentence was a number that made the lights flicker behind Wade's eyes, but the number isn't the part that sticks. The part that sticks is the weight sliding off a place that forgot it could stand straight. A month later, my street felt different. Not quiet, like fear. Quiet, like Sunday mornings when a diner hums low and easy. The neighbor with his golden retriever waved like she saw me. Not my car. The guy who stared at asphalt whenever a cruiser rolled by said my name and got it right. The station sits under a state task force. Now cameras glow when they're supposed to. Reports go where they're supposed to. Officer Tran took a seat at Internal Affairs because the room finally decided a spine is a qualification. And me, I keep a tape measure in my glove box, wheels straight. Not because I'm scared, but because tiny things become big stories when the wrong person is bored. People ask why I didn't break his wrist when the gun came out, why I didn't end it on the street. And I tell them there are two kinds of wins, the kind you hold in your hands and the kind you hold up to the light, so everyone can see that day. I needed the folder, the eyes, the long game. Do I wish the world worked without pendant mics and dead drops and protocols with names that sound like storm?